Welcome to the Postgame. I'm Michael Brooks with the crew. Matt Leck, David Griscom, David Slavic in the Digitosphere, Vic Viana. Do I do that right?
Yeah, no, you're good.
Beautiful. He's our film director, conceptualizer, man. We got to replay that ad for the illicit histories, maybe. And of course, Forrest, our YouTube guy, and each and every one of you. Welcome new patrons. Thanks, everybody. And we're joined by returning champion, writer, attorney, and activist, Malaika Jabali. Malaika, thanks for hanging out for the first part of the post game.
No problem.
Were you actually were you a big Nipsey Hussle fan, or did you just like him?
I knew nothing
About
about Nipsey Hussle other than the fact that he was with Lauren London.
See, that's the part I didn't know.
Okay. That's my only foray into Nipsey Hussle.
So I like him. I've listened to him for a couple of years. I'm not like Waz. This is a very big deal too. And for people who listen to Woke Bros, we're having Trey, who's also on Counted Things, and Trey's like extremely well versed in the type of Los Angeles politics that are at stake here. So we're gonna do the show that will come out on Thursday for Woke Bros. But I liked Nipsey a lot. I wasn't like the biggest fan of his, but I did. It's someone I actually listened to. This is the first person who's been murdered like this in a while, in like a pop culture sense, that I registered it somewhat as a fan. Not the biggest fan, but not just like, oh, well, that's fucking terrible, and who is that? I did know who this person was. Rational National, who does another great show on YouTube. David is also a patron of ours. Thank you, David, who we are supposed to do stuff with soon. He actually caught this clip. One of the things that's interesting to me about Nipsey Hussle is that he was 33, so he'd actually been around as like a genuinely successful independent artist for quite some time, like maybe even 10 years. One of our patrons actually said that he organized a concert that Nipsey was part of years ago. And he's like, yeah, he was a super nice, good artist to deal with. So David flagged this clip from 2006. And a lot of people have been talking about how Nipsey Hussle was concretely investing in where he was from in LA, right? Like everybody says that now. That's like that is a cliche I've heard, like invest in the community. It's almost like a hip hop version of Beto O'Rourke speak. But Nipsey Hussle actually did significantly. And this is him as a young guy in 2006 talking. David's old flag this. Let's check it out.
What do you think? Why do you think it's so hard for people to get that message? I mean, one and a half, you get guys that say they got to impress the females. Female ain't trying to talk to you unless you blinged out. On the other hand, you got other people feel like they got to show off to the homies and impress them with their riches. I mean, what do you think is how do we get that out of that mindset?
I mean, I feel like that's insecurity. Material things ain't nothing, you feel me? At the end of the day, it's who you is, You wasn't born with it, you gonna die without it. So if you feel you need some diamonds or some jewelry to get at a female, it's because you feel you lack something within yourself, you know what I mean? So all that, as far as that angle, it's like I feel that's insecurity.
LA right now has been experiencing a lot of black and brown stuff, a little violence going on there. What would you say to that? And somebody in your neighborhood coming from where you at, what message do you give so people can maybe see things in a different light?
I mean, I feel like, we got a common enemy, you know what I'm saying? So I don't feel we got time to be beefing. You know what I'm saying? It don't make no sense. That's divide and conquer, you know what I'm saying? That's Willie Lynch, you know what I mean? We got a common enemy in these capitalists that's taking control of our assets and colonizing what we doing. As far as rap music, as far as our continent we came from, our culture and all that, like, we got a common enemy, so we ain't got time to have issues amongst ourselves. The same as well as a black on black.
Yeah, he was very steady with that. But I always think it's interesting when somebody in pop culture specifically says capitalists. That always hits me. So
Yeah, I think his dad was a Marxist.
Okay.
Like he was an activist.
That makes a
in
lot
LA.
of sense. And his family was from Eritrea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's the third person whose dad has been a Marxist, but probably the best because the previous were Buttigieg
And Kamala.
Kamala.
Yeah, we're not comparing those two to Nipsey Hussle, but yes,
Sure.
that is the third in a string. But we're on different.
It's nice to know that
here.
if you're a Marxist and have kids, they're not all going to turn out like the first two.
I like that framing.
That is a good framing. What I liked was, did you, by the way, we didn't have time. I don't know. How did we miss covering this? Maybe this happened when we were on vacation. Well, you caught when Kamala Harris was on the Breakfast Club, right? And she was just like, "I'm from Jamaica."
No.
She's literally. I don't even know if I want to listen to this again.
I mean, I heard her say. I mean, I heard of the clip where she's talking about her smoking weed,
Right.
and then her dad is like, "What are you talking about?"
That was what we didn't cover. Her dad literally writes a letter on, I think that a news service in Jamaica. I don't remember the name of it, but he's like, "This is an insult to our family. It's the worst form of identity politics. She should be ashamed."
Well, the other part
It
we
didn't
didn't.
strike me when she was saying that. I was like, really? I don't experience like middle class Jamaicans as being super stoked.
Well,
about
I
getting high.
was primed to be culturally sensitive to that by Bodega Boys because like the month earlier, Jesus went on a big thing about how middle class Jamaican people, they're not like Rastafarians. They're
Right,
very
yeah,
like
There are
Although-
other types of Jamaicans.
There's other types of
Who knew?
Jamaicans. Yeah. That was with Kamala Harris if she was just, she's,
Well, the other fun thing is, and shout out to Champagne Sharks for going deep into the sort of forensics of
Oh, yeah,
how they
everybody-
helped cover for her because
this was also funny.
she got caught, I think, getting the chronologically wrong. Like
She
Snoop
said
Dogg.
she was getting high listening to Tupac and Snoop Dogg, and she either had the weed was so good that she had a pre-sense of those albums and was hearing it on a platonic plane, or those, the album she's talking about came out in the early 90s and late 80s, and the most hilarious cover, which T debunked on Champagne Sharks, was some idiot, I don't even remember who, some idiot on Twitter, which I realized could stand for millions of accounts, was like, attention, white critics of Kamala. There's a thing called swap meets where like hip hop was delivered in an underground fashion in the 1980s, and you would go and you'd get music out of the trunk of people's cars, literally implying that Kamala Harris was like driving
At
from
a swap
Howard
meet.
to like Crenshaw to be like, I really want to be ahead of the curve.
So I will say, apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, but she was interpreting Charlamagne's question differently. And so I think he asked a question and somebody else asked a question. And so she was answering that second question.
Exactly.
But I haven't examined the tape.
So Champagne Sharks did, and probably to a
I was gonna
obsessive
say,
degree.
I am sure that T has examined the tape.
Yeah.
That I have a lot of faith in.
Because actually that was the excuse that they gave, is that she was answering another question. But if you break it down as obsessively as they did, it doesn't seem like she was actually answering both questions. But
I mean, also, like, I know who I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to, and it's not her. Sorry.
Also, she sucks, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Doesn't matter.
Like, people always feel this need. I'm like, look, like we talked about before. Like, I'm in the opinion and analysis side of things. It's my job. Look, you cannot lie about people, but it is absolutely not my job to run interference for somebody who sucks.
yeah,
Makes
I mean
sense.
the stuff like this stuff is just sort of the like spice to put on top of how much you like your actual opinions about these people, right?
Right. My formation of my opinion on Kamala Harris is not like I was taking a serious look at her until she fucking mistimed Snoop's release. Yeah. I was a little bit more concerned about, like torturing truant families. That's sort of more my concern. Although it is funny. Let's play this ad. I think this is a good way, and I would like your feedback on this. I think this was a very effective way of framing Medicare for all. This is a Bernie Sanders Rocana ad on Medicare for all and freedom.
It's about the freedom of an entrepreneur to dream about starting a business without fearing that her family will lose health care. It's about the freedom of an employee to change jobs without worrying about losing his doctor. It's about the freedom of a mother to take care of her sick child without fearing that the hospital bills will pile up.
The goal of healthcare, you want to hear a radical idea? Another one? Goal of healthcare must be to provide quality care to all people, not to make billions in profits for the insurance companies and their CEOs.
Here's what Medicare for All does. It reduces the cost so that families don't have to pay $6,000 premiums every year that they can't afford, and it saves our country money by getting rid of the excessive insurance profits and the big pharma monopolies.
Today, we say to the private health insurance companies, whether they like it or not, the United States is going to join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all people as a right.
Every time that people come and say Medicare for all is not affordable, here's what we need to point out. I want us to ask them, how is the current system affordable with its $59 million payout to Aetna CEO, its $350 billion giveaway to Big Pharma, and its $49 trillion cost to the American economy? The current system is not affordable. Medicare for all is about freedom.
What do you think of that frame?
Which part?
The freedom, the idea of it being like the actual freedom move is to give everybody government health care.
Yeah.
In contrast to all the Republican talking points you'll hear.
Right. No, I think it's great, and it kind of copies from their playbook, except you're actually giving them some sort of choice. Because just about everything that they say that you got more rights to or more freedom with is giving more freedom to, the private sector. So, no, I think that's a great framing.
Also, that Aetna CEO really looked the part.
Yeah, and like the dark.
It was good that he was such a
shadows.
greasy-looking motherfucker, right?
But that's the best thing that Bernie's been doing, is really coming after these companies by name. I think that's so important to start doing, because everyone can talk about, oh, yeah, there's so much greed and corruption. But when you start calling companies out and people out, then you start to have mobilizations and campaigns against those specific organizations instead of just an ethereal boogeyman.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you
Just
see
Wall
this,
Street
this
or-
Trump tweet
Right.
from 23 hours ago where he calls private health is like everybody agrees that Obamacare doesn't work. Premiums and deductibles are far too high. True. Really bad health care. Even the Democrats want to replace it, but with Medicare for all, which would cause 180 million Americans to lose their beloved private health insurance.
Let me tell you something. This is another great reason to nominate Bernie. I would love to have that fight.
Oh, I cannot wait.
Really?
I
You don't beloved
can't.
your private
I
health
cannot
insurance,
wait.
Malaika?
But wait, the Republicans. What else was he trying
Yeah,
to
what's
say
the follow-up?
there?
What
Was
is there?
more?
Is there a follow-up to
Well,
it?
unfortunately, he doesn't thread his tweets how you're
Oh my
supposed to.
God. Of course he doesn't.
Here, I'll try to find it here. Let's
Our
see
great.
here.
I think that's what it was.
Our beloved, their beloved
Oh, yeah, here it is.
private.
Our beloved, the Republicans are developing a really great health care plan with far lower premiums, cost, in parentheses. I'll put this up because it's funny. In other words, it would be far less expensive and much more usable than Obamacare. Vote will be taken right after the election when Republicans hold the Senate and win back the House. Oh, God. This is terrifying me, actually.
Yeah, it is actually terrifying. Because when the Democrats figure out a way to nominate Amy Klobuchar, this will happen. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't want to put out bad energy.
To do this for a while now.
He's been trying to do it for a while.
Why is he saying it's suddenly going to work now?
Because John McCain, that loser, is finally dead.
Look, look, we had this great plan to give all of you better health care for cheaper. We could have given to you two in the first 4 years, but I thought, let's hold it back.
Let's hold it back. You want to wait.
Look,
Sometimes it's more exciting in the second act.
Look, I know you need it now, but guess what? It's going to be double
But
good when
guess
it
what?
comes.
It's coming soon, and it's going to be. You
It'll
know
be
what?
worth
You're not
the
going to
wait.
believe it.
Look, have you ever heard of the little boy who wanted two healthcare? Or you get one healthcare now or two healthcares later.
A lot of studies suggest that kids who can sit and wait for a reward do better.
Yeah, so
than
wait for
those
your...
who-
I think studies is giving him way too much credit.
Many people are saying.
Many people are, excuse me, not studies.
Right, there it is.
Many people are saying that kids that can wait to eat the candy do better than the other kids. And a lot of people are saying it.
So just hold on.
So hold on.
Wait
It'll
for
be great.
2020.
Don't worry, you won't miss your beloved private health insurance.
It's very important that we do healthcare. So in 2020, we'll get it. It's going to be simple.
I've noticed that Bernie takes a lot of shots at Trump. And I just also, the only other thing I want to say about that, I think that is a very clear contrast with Elizabeth Warren, what David said. Did you go to his Bernie's Brooklyn thing? I was shocked at the amount of specificity that it wasn't just like, the tech companies do this. It was literally like, Jeff Bezos has an expense account and we're going to fucking take it and we're going to give it to you. Like it was super like, he has an instinct for class politics.
Right.
That's the socialism, you know, right? Like, it's not all these like nerdy debates about what kind of this or that. It's like Elizabeth Warren has some great policies and she's cool, whatever. But like, she doesn't have that understanding that like, even in order to do like a nice reform agenda like that you really are going to have to take it to these people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fight. Like, we're really in class warfare right now. And so if you don't have that sort of energy behind you, I think people aren't going to register it as genuine as much as they would find it in Bernie.
And not go to the streets. I think like if Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn, for that matter, come to power, it's going to be even more work what comes after they come to power. Right. And so like the concept that you need to mobilize versus like, well, I'm going to come to power with all these great ideas and then we're going to negotiate. That is why I can't get over her equivocating on Medicare for All. It's not just that I think Medicare for All is a complete moral non-negotiable, which I do, and it is fundamentally moral to me. It's that I am shocked that the only reason she would equivocate on that, because I think she does have good instincts, not like the others who I just don't think actually really support it. I think she probably does, but she's actually thinking in terms of like, oh, well, I'm going to have to negotiate.
Yeah, the politicking.
Right. And it's delusional.
And she's bad at that.
And she's not good at it. And even in order to do what she's looking to do, in order to do what Beto's looking to do, would take unprecedented. It took unprecedented mobilization to pass Obamacare. And that's an old heritage plan. Let's take a call. You're calling from an 832 area code. Please, you're calling from an 832 area code. Please tell us who you are, where you're calling from, and what question you have for Malaika Jabali.
How's it going? My name is Demetrius, calling from Houston, Texas.
Hey, Demetrius. Good to hear from you. What's on your mind?
How's it going? Yeah, so I just wanted like just some, I guess you could say, sort of advice for you guys about a particular discussion that tends to I find myself in a lot quite often, which is like, you know, like how can, as a person on the left, how can I get people to like understand things such as like taxation as being a form of justice? And the reason I ask it is because I was taking a class recently. It's like a civics class for Texas, and we were talking about we got into the issue of like taxes and stuff like that, and we were talking about, you know, what are some good aspects of, you know, the Trump presidency or something like that. And so this one girl in class talks about like how
always her. Yep.
She's excited. Yeah,
that one girl.
Yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, what does her dad do?
Like
she work at Exxon?
That her taxes are low, and it was funny because my professor also chimed in and was excited as well. And so I'm sitting in class and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, I mean, low taxes isn't really always necessarily a good thing. I mean, the administration is basically, passing austerity laws and stuff like that. I mean, that's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, so I don't know. That was just a question I just wanted to bring up. Like, how could I, like, what could I say in a moment like that to get people to see like taxes are actually a good thing, that this is really a just thing to a certain degree?
Malaika?
I think the underlying problem is some people just don't care about justice. So the framing, I think you'll have to really assess the situation and where you are. So there might be some people on the fence. That girl, she sounds like she's just doing her own thing, and that's okay.
yeah.
For her. But for folks who might be on the fence, they need to actually see that they are not within that group of people who are getting privileged from these lower taxes. So actually ask them these questions and say, well, how much are you being taxed? And where is that tax money going? And if we do increase it, we're not necessarily talking about you, when we're talking about the marginal tax rate. You know, she might be
unless we are, right, Matt, right.
She might be like in the billionaire class, so she won't give a fuck. But for everybody else, you know, once you kind of uncouple their actual reality from this sort of ethos that, you know, we can all succeed and be in that 1%, then it might hit home a little bit better.
I think that's good. Wow. I think, like, especially coming from a class angle and recognizing that even if you're getting taxed at a very low rate as a working person, that's going to be so much less significant than someone who's making a crazy amount of money having their taxes be ridiculously low, because you just have so much less of the pie. And when you're talking about taxes, you're talking about something that's supposed to be a redistribution of power in our society and a redistribution of opportunity. But there's just one more thing. I think this might not be an argument that will win your friends over, but it's a way to think about it yourself, and it might help you find your, you know, how you want to frame your own argument. Is that you also have to think about what currency is and what money is. And that's basically how we're designating productivity and access to resources in the society. So what you say to them is that what happens now is we have a few people who have all of this power themselves. There's a few individuals who are in control of all of this, you know, this way that we designate how we're going to produce and organize our economy. And don't you think it'd be a lot better if as a society we were deciding what we're doing with that together instead of just allowing a few people to hoard it all for themselves?
Yeah, just an illustration. We're undergoing a climate crisis while Betsy DeVos has 10 yachts. So
right. And I just want to add, Demetrius, I think all of this is great advice. If you haven't yet watched the debunk video or segment last week with Ben Burgess, because it's specifically on this taxation is theft scam. Yeah. But I think what I like about Ben that I actually agree with, so I think in election campaigns, the idea of targeting like the middle is a disaster and really bad for core left constituencies. So while I don't like that idea in campaigns at all, I actually think in debates, there's some value. So like Malaika said, you're not talking to this woman, really. If you get into a debate with her and she's fixed, you're setting yourself up to make your position look good for people who don't have a clear opinion yet. So always adopt that. And I think there's a lot of all of the ways that people also, you know, outlined analytically how to kind of frame it. I also think, frankly, you know, that's also just where like presentation matters and what side you're on. I mean, I am totally not above. Like I've been in arguments like that with another person where it does get to that point where it's like, hey, look, you're cool with children dying to subsidize somebody you don't even know. That's not where I'm coming from. Right. But, you know, good for you. Right. Good for you being an immoral cuck.
I'd also just like,
you know, it actually works pretty well.
I'd also just like to add, too, that I think, especially the way that a lot of Americans think about politics is like the left loves taxes and the right is anti-taxes. I think that you don't want to fall into that trap. For example, like, you know, I'm as, you know, left socialist as it gets. I very much don't like punitive taxes. I don't think it's like
I don't think anybody
taxes.
in New York City who makes like under
taxes.
$500,000 a year should pay any taxes.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, and I agree with you 100%. I'm not into cigarette taxes or alcohol taxes or all these lifestyle
punitive on poor people, and I don't like that.
State taxes. My position on taxes is a bunch of people have been stealing, or a small amount of people have been stealing a lot of shit. And wages hide the real relationship, and we just need to take it back.
So don't let yourself get into, because I don't know, I grew up in the South too, and that was like literally all of my political discussions were like about this tax question, right? And you just get trapped in it, and so don't fall into that, right?
Did you ever go like, hey man, I'm a communist, but I'm not trying to tax your barbecue either. Did you do that?
I like barbecue.
Yeah, exactly.
I want you to eat your pig. I want you to eat more pigs.
Now, barbecue is personal property. It's not private.
What I want those goddamn Cokes. Stop trying to interrupt your grill. That's why I read Ho Chi Minh.
We should be having more time for barbecues.
Dude, that's a platform right there, baby.
There's a fella named Amachal Cabral. Same worry where he was coming from. Portuguese were taking his livestock.
Like how Griscom's just another Bush brother.
Yeah, he's the cool Bush brother.
He's left Bush.
He's left Bush. Yo, left Bush would probably be my favorite politician in the history of the planet.
That's so good.
It's like, sorry. Imagine Bush doing even like the Obama, like, you didn't make that. Tax dollars made that happen.
I mean,
just run around asking for more tax cuts.
The type of institutional knowledge that left Bush would have about the things like the CIA is like, you didn't build that. The CIA built that.
The CIA built it.
They
you
wrote
don't
it
know
over.
what built it because you don't know how this country works.
Like the little laugh.
That dumb laugh. Oh, he would be so awesome if he was not what he is.
If he were a whole other person.
Right, if he was a whole other person, he would be amazing. All right, let's do a couple of Discord questions, and then we will let Malaika go, but I hope you will come back to us again soon, if you can. That would be great. TMBS is my jam. Beto said, can John McCain's daughter get us some free beer? Okay. So I like mid-concept Discord jokes.
Must be a reference to something.
Yeah. Maybe Meghan McCain could finally do something useful and get us a free keg.
It's not super bad or something.
No. Super bad? What's super bad?
You mean, like, I don't know what is that a reference to something?
I don't remember. Yeah. Can you add that there are 33 confirmed cases of measles in Oakland? Oakland, CO? Is there an Oakland, Colorado?
I'm assuming it means Oakland, CA.
Wait, but then it's also Michigan, one of the state's wealthiest, and one in Wayne, Colorado.
I mean, I think just vaccinate
I'm confused.
your children.
Basically, I don't know what. Well, but wait, if you vaccinate your kids, then they're at risk of things like autism.
Okay, come on.
I'm sorry.
Forrest, don't clip
that
this.
was a joke. Don't
clip
it.
that.
Blah blah blah. Vaccinate your kids. You have any thought on this measles outbreak? You want to get in on this?
That's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. But if you eat beetroots, cure it.
Who said?
We're gonna hear so much
What are
shit.
beetroots? Are beetroots beets?
I don't know. I just know that they cure measles.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. I know that actually the measles cases this year already
way up the
outstripped.
charts.
But actually, so the problem of people not vaccinating has been building up for several years. Why is there a jump this year? Do we know?
I'm not sure, but I mean, I think herd immunity can be tricky like that.
Okay. According to the Institute for Policy Studies, Wall Street bonuses has increased 1,000% since 1985, from 13,970 to 153,700. If the federal minimum wage had increased at that rate, it'd be worth 33.51 today instead of 7.25. Eat the rich, am I right? Well, absolutely. But the question I want to turn that into you for Malaika before you go is, do you think that I feel like do you think $15 minimum wage is like way too low to campaign on?
To campaign on?
Or
No.
implement, or either way. Do you think that they should be, because I like that point though, that if it had been rising at the same rate as Wall Street bonuses, it would be 33.51. Do you think that we could aim higher on that?
Why not?
Yeah, fuck it, 25.
I mean, seriously. Okay, can you take one more call?
Sure.
All right, let's take one more call, and then we're going to take a brief break and get to Ben Burgess. You are calling from a 343 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. I'm Tao. It's an honor. I'm calling from unceded Anishinaabe territory in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah, or not so much Canada. I hate this place.
Will you tell me your name again, please?
I just want to say my piece, and you can comment after.
Sure.
The reason I'm calling tonight is there's a development going on here called Zibi, which is an Anishinaabe word for free-flowing river, and it's pretty much a company that's trying to develop a place where people would gather here for thousands of years and exchange goods and stories and songs. And we need to make sure that this land is preserved for Canadians for thousands of years in the future, too. So if everybody could just go to akakojuan.ca, I'll link you up with the links and everything, and tweet that we could, make this a park or just not ZB's proposal to develop it.
Are you on the Discord? Do you use the Discord?
Continue itself in Canada. Yeah.
Do you use the Discord?
Yeah, I'll throw it to you, man, for sure.
You got to
Thanks
send
so
me
much.
all of the resources on this, and we'll do that aggressively.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much,
All
dude.
right. Let's take one more call. You're calling from a 321 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, what's up, man? This is Marcus, the Brazilian. What's going on?
Marcus, how you doing, man? Good to hear from you.
Good, man. I listened to that conversation you and Hassan Piker had over the weekend. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was fun. I think, by the way, like Hassan and John Idarola and Ben Mankiewicz, they're not going to be like they'll be at the live show in LA.
Wow. Nice. Yeah, I'll be there too.
Sweet. What do you have on your minds?
All right. So, so I'm calling in because, I'm calling in with a little bit of a rage. Like, I don't think that the American public is doing enough or anything at all, hardly, about the immigration crisis, where the Trump administration has done just long-term damage to these immigrants that are fleeing, violence and all sorts of things from Central America, coming here for refuge or for a better life or what have you. I mean, I just read we were given this story about, young children being ripped away from their parents, and then we were told by the media that, the Trump administration reversed that, but then we came to find out later that, oh, wait, actually they're still doing it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then I read something recently that, in El Paso, they're just bordering them up around chain link fence, and some toddlers have bruises on them because they slept on gravel. I just find this treatment of human beings completely unacceptable, and I think some politicians are making some noise about it, but I don't think the American public is hardly doing anything about it, because I remember when thousands of people went to the airports when Trump tried to do a Muslim ban, and we got him, we really forced him to reverse that, because people made a
the courts did. The courts did that, but and they actually allowed a modified version of it in the end. But regardless, I agree with you 100%. That was the most important thing that happens in the beginning of that. And I definitely know, to me, going to JFK and doing that was incredible. That just was, yes, that was hugely important. I don't know, Malaika, do you have any thoughts on this?
I was at LAX, and we shut the international terminal there. It was insane. So many people were there, and seeing it happening all across the country.
I think there's exhaustion and overwhelm, and I agree with you completely that it's disgusting and unacceptable. And I think there's inevitable normalization, and people are also exhausted and overwhelmed. Because even I know that when there was actually some serious protests last summer about this. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think you're 100% right. I don't know the response. Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah.
Other than to corroborate what you're saying in terms of, it's kind of the news cycle is constantly. We've got more and more tragedies that keep popping up, so I think it is a bit of fatigue, and then people may not know precisely what to do. So we see the images, but there hasn't been, at least as far as I can tell, a mass movement to direct people's frustration to the same extent. Maybe I'm just not.
No, I think that's true.
As aware, but I heard of people going to JFK. I don't know what the mobilization, and it's so massive. I don't know where would people go.
Well, last summer people were protesting in front of ICE offices,
actual offices and stuff,
and they shut down. I know there was a major stakeout in front of the one in Portland. There was a lot in Oregon. There was a lot going on. But Marcus, you're 100% right.
There's definitely still a lot of solidarity networks too regarding ICE. that I know are still active. Basically, communities that go around and are patrolling for ICE agents within their neighborhoods to make sure if they see anybody, then they'll sort of come in and prevent that. But I know that's a different issue than what we're talking about, people coming into the country. That's something. If something you're really passionate about, it's worth trying to find organizations that are organizing around that. I know in Texas, the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services is a good organization to check out. I don't know about California, but yeah, no, I mean it's definitely something that we.
I'll also talk with Ronald Reagan about this.
Yeah, that'd be good
because he's an immigration attorney. So when we did that show with him on like the infrastructure of how these institutions actually work, because I think both he'll have ideas about how to actually directly help in terms of activism and intervention, but I also think like this is something he gets super specific with candidates about as well, because like abolish ICE kind of got so softened it doesn't really mean that much in my understanding. So I think you need to have a lot of like rigor and precision with these candidates when they sort of say that to what are you actually going to do to reverse this whole infrastructure. I appreciate the call, man. I'll see you in LA.
All right, man. Lula Livre.
Lula Livre. That's right. Malaika, tell all the people all the ways they can find your excellent work.
I now have a website.
Fuck.
So that's cute.
Can we get that?
It's my name, malaikajabali.com. Super creative. And
it doesn't need to be creative. We're like in the general, I feel like we're back in like the General Mills era of brands. Like several years ago, it was like super, like people would be like, well, I'm on Twitter, but my name is like Global Guy or some bullshit. Now it's like, what's your fucking name? People are less cute with that shit now. They just want it, so that's a good thing.
About it. All right, so
I'm upset about lack of clarity and communication. I thought you were with me. I thought you were annoyed by Beto too.
Michael's foremost a branding expert.
That's not totally untrue.
The Michael Brooks show, just keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
So
keep it simple. You got that drop? I went through like 5 or 6 other names that were clever and all this shit. I was like, well, what's actually going to last?
Yeah.
Just feed my brand, my name.
There you go.
That is also what the show is.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Who was that?
That's Steve, I think, Klubeck.
Steve Klubeck.
Who's a timeshare
He's
sort
a
of
timeshare
millionaire
kingpin, and he had this meltdown on CNBC 2 summers ago. And first of all, he looks like an extra in Showgirls. He looks like some guy who like a stripper needed to knife because he was like bothering them, and he was just like, I'm not gonna give this guy. See what I'm saying? You're gonna tell me I'm wrong?
Interest
here
for
it is.
Private equity firms, keeping carried interest for real estate firms.
Hear the millionaire or billionaire word, and I've told them to stop it, knock it off, because everyone wants to do really well, and this is the world of the aspirations.
Then are you worried that the Democratic Party is going too far to the left?
So much so, it drives me nuts. So much so, it would make me quit the party.
Okay.
And I've made it very clear, I'll cut your money off. And others will do the same. We've had enough.
Pause it.
Pimpin', big pimpin', big pimpin'.
That's right, but also can we acknowledge how much more likable this guy is than Howard Schultz? Oh, yeah. he's saying exactly the same shit.
He'd have 10%.
Was like, oh yeah, he would be doing all right. Howard Schultz is like, it's Starbucks. This guy's just like, I would prefer to be stuffing my face and smoking cigars. But you keep talking about billionaires.
He campaigns just by like driving yachts up and down rivers.
This is an everyman plutocrat right here.
Need a new brand.
And what is that brand? Because right now there is an opportunity. If Democrats lose, for example, in the state of Virginia, if that isn't a wake-up call that the Democratic leadership needs to get together and say, we've got to find a middle ground. Because if the Democrats continue to go far to the left, you've got that whole group in the center that aren't going to go the way of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. And then you're going to fracture the party even more.
It's fractured. It's broken. We need a new brand. It needs to be simple.
Here you go, see?
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Tax reform. Keep it simple. Infrastructure. No bumps in the road. What more do we have to say?
What more?
They need to have a new brand created.
And of course, like, I got to be careful with libel laws, but I would just say look up Diamond Resort International and business practices.
Just to make sure.
Just check it out. Maybe just do a little.
It's a good habit to get into with anybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anybody,
check out the whole timeshare business model.
Any rich person that appears on TV.
It's absolutely nothing like multi-level marketing. That's all I'll say. Nothing
in the
like
timeshare business.
Yeah.
No.
Nothing like multi-level.
There's
marketing.
nothing weird in the timeshare industry.
So, anyways, that's where Keep It Simple came from.
Yeah.
So we can go to your great website. It's malaikajabali.com.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Perfect.
And that's my Twitter name.
Okay, and we have all of the links to all the different ways we can find you. You can find Malaika's writing at The Intercept, Current Affairs, The Root, bunch of other. Essence, Glamour.
That's mostly it.
Well, that's you're covering a lot of bases there. All right, we're gonna take a brief break. We'll be right back with Ben Burgess on the Postgame.
I was extraordinarily proud of the Paris Accords because, look, I know, I know we're an oil country, and we need American energy, and by the way, American energy production. You wouldn't always know it, but it went up every year I was president, and that whole. Suddenly, America's like the biggest oil producer and the biggest gas. That was me, people. I just want you to. It's a little like sometimes you go to Wall Street and folks will be grumbling about anti-business. I said, "Have you checked where your stocks were when I came in office and where they are now? What are you talking? What are you complaining about? Just say thank you, please." Because I want to raise your taxes a couple percent.
Welcome back to the Postgame. Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is our official debunker, Ben Burgess. He teaches logic at Rutgers University. He's the author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, which is going to be available in pre-order from Zero Books in about a week or two. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
That's very exciting, Ben. So it's actually good because the debunk you're doing tonight can lead into some teases for my book. So
yeah.
There's a little thing called synergy, to paraphrase Steve Klubeck. So over this weekend, or I guess Monday primarily, Sam Harris, I don't even remember. I think the way this argument started was Murtaza Hussain, who is a friend of mine and of the show, who's a great reporter at The Intercept, noted, I think, the similarities in the Church Christ terrorist manifesto on birth rates and some of Sam Harris's writing on birth rates. And, of course, Sam Harris, like a whirling dervish of whiny aggrievement, launched into action and was like, I don't remember actually what he said. I don't know if we have the tweet in front of us, but it was unfair, I'm sure, and yada, yada, yada. Matt, where are we starting here? We have the Mehdi Hassan tweet to start us.
Murtaza Hassan.
This is Mehdi Hassan.
Oh, this is
Murtaza. Murtaza Hussain is the one who started.
So I have the original ones where the Murtaza thing started, and basically, I don't know if you can see here. I can make this bigger. This is the original thing where Sam Harris was basically.
Okay, this is the original Sam Harris quote. And I'm sure that, it's like all Sam Harris quotes, and only Sam Harris and a small group of Redditors can properly interpret it. But for now, let's just read it on its face. Islam is the fastest growing religion in Europe. The demographic trends are ominous. Given current rates, France could be a majority Muslim country in 25 years. And that is if immigration were to stop tomorrow. Basically, Murtaza noted this, and
Sam Harris tried to defend it, saying where it came from, but it basically comes from some Islamophobic crank that had some concept of Eurabia.
Right, and Harris didn't sort of respond to the substance of it. He just said, needless to say, I never knowingly published false statistics. There's also a difference between false statistics and demographic trends that change. This is a dumb smear, which ironically seems to accept the inflammatory logic of the original point.
And then just to catch us up to the Mehdi thing, Mehdi jumped into this thread basically saying, how can you do this? Sam Harris responded to Mehdi by posting some old clip of Mehdi Hassan, and I didn't even watch that clip. It was something that it was taken out of context, and Mehdi has disavowed it numerous times, unlike Sam Harris and this Eurabia concept, for instance. So, yeah.
So, and that takes us up to, I'll just read this Mehdi thing, and then you can take us through all you want to take us through, Ben. Sam Harris launched a personal attack on me, cynically trying to smear me based on ancient edited remarks I long ago disavowed and repeatedly regretted and apologized for. So here's a thread of 15 years of his own bigoted, offensive remarks that he's never apologized for. Actually, let me read one or two. It's time that we admitted that we are not at war with terrorism, we're at war with Islam. Sam Harris, 2004. Muslim immigrants often show little inclination to acquire secular and civic values in their host countries, demanding tolerance for their backwardness, their misogyny, and anti-Semitism. Sam Harris, 2004. Islam, more than any other religion human beings have devised, has all of the makings of a thoroughgoing cult of death. Sam Harris, 2004. And final one. The gravity of Jewish suffering over the ages culminating in the Holocaust made it impossible to entertain any suggestion that Jews might have brought their own troubles upon themselves. This, however, is rather a narrow sense true. That is the perfect Sam Harris quote. Sam Harris, End of Faith, 2004. Okay, Ben, come on, man. Hit us with some logic. What's going on?
So one thing I was just going to point out is that it's amazing that throughout this discussion, Sam Harris has in a lot of ways acted like a right-wing version of a character of like an SJW woke lord. That like he's that for one thing he wants to cancel Mehdi Hassan for something he said decades ago that he's since disavowed, and he's also, in response to my favorite part of all this, when Juan Cole came on to correct a lot of what Harris was saying, Harris sort of sent out the bat signal for everybody he knows who was raised Muslim to come flock to Twitter to defend him. That they have I'm Islamophobic, am I? Well, you're not Muslim at all, and what about my friends Abdul and Mahmoud, and come tell me, come say how cool I am, right? So the whole move here is to say that even though, as Juan Cole pointed out in this discussion, I was studying the Quran in Cairo before you were born, right? That they have the lived experience of anybody who was raised Muslim just automatically trumps everything that Juan Cole knows about the subject, right? So,
the ultimate like standpoint epistemology argument, actually, in like its most overdone, absurd variety that these guys are supposedly always complaining about.
Exactly. Now, also, I did watch the original Mehdi Hassan clip, and Mehdi Hassan says a lot of bad things in the clip. It's it's good, homophobic things, for example. It's good that he's disavowed it. But he's not, it's not like he was an Al-Qaeda supporter 15 years ago.
Right.
He's actually explicitly denouncing violence as being incompatible with Islam in the clip, which is going to be important when we get to what Harris is trying to do with it. So the basic thing that Harris is doing is what Harris always does. It's one of his key moves, which is a version of the equivocation fallacy we've talked about before with Jordan Peterson, where you're using key words or phrases to mean different things in different parts of the argument. It's a variant of that's sometimes called the Mott and Bailey argument. So the idea is, it's taken from a visual analogy from like an old kind of castle where you had like the motte, like the courtyard around it. And then like if you were attacked there, you could retreat into the Bailey, right? The castle itself. And so the idea is that the motte is some reasonable reading of your claim that you can, the motte is where you spend most of your time. The motte is what he's actually trying to get at when he says these things about Islam and Muslim immigrants, and everybody understands what he's saying, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're supposed to understand it that way. But the idea is that if you're attacked in the motte, you can retreat to the Bailey, which is this super narrow reading of what you meant. It's like, oh, all I said was... And then, he'll give some like really anodyne, version of what he said. That's clearly not all he said.
Oh, this is always, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, this is always the move, right? This is like, and let's just say, because we'll deal with this later, but let's say it's something like, and if you say that I'm saying this is it, you're taking me out of context and smearing me. But say you write something like, there might be a scenario that we have to preemptively nuke countries in the Middle East. And then when you're called on saying something like that, not that, and if you say I'm talking about that, you're totally taking me out of context, then you basically pivot to a version of like, all I'm saying is that Al-Qaeda is bad.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Which is what Harris, of course, did when Hassan trotted out these like 15 instances over the last 15, years of Harris saying insanely Islamophobic things.
Right.
And it's also important because what Harris...
Oh, we lost you.
Oh, sorry. Can you...
No, we're losing you, man. Ben?
You hear me?
No.
Okay, here, you wanna...
This is why I never like Skype.
Okay, all right. Here, you gonna call me back on the phone?
Yeah, I'll call you right back. Right here, folks. Ben?
Okay.
No, Ben.
Yeah.
Ben.
Yes.
You still sound like you're speaking across like a hallway or something. Ben? I'm going to call your cell, okay? Yeah, I'm going to call your cell. All right, yeah, take it down.
Okay.
Ben, yeah. All right, we're back.
All right.
All right, so
All
go.
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what Harris wants to do is say that all he wants to do is all he's doing is criticizing Islam. Anybody who's interpreting him as saying anything bigoted or racist is taking him out of context. They're misreading him. They're misinterpreting him, which is also funny because another point I want to make about this is that in the Mehdi Hassan exchange, right? The first thing that Harris said to him, right, was, "Oh, you used to be a religious bigot," right? And then he had this clip, and he said, "So, is it the case that if you denounce it," and then his trick is to say, "If you're really denouncing it, then you can't accuse me of being an Islamophobe for criticizing these views."
Oh my
so, which is amazing because, first of all, Harris's defense is always that he's not saying, when he says that Muslim immigrants are backwards, so we should be really worried about them, when he says that the people who are the most realistic about the threat posed to Europe by Muslim immigration are fascists, right? That's a almost word for word Harris quote. He always says, "Oh, no. I'm not doing bigotry against Muslims. I don't know where you're getting that idea. All I'm doing is criticizing Islam." So as long as his claim is that the reason that Muslims are backwards and this and that and the other thing dangerous is because of the content of Islam, then he can't be accused of bigotry for saying this. But hold on. He's saying that Mehdi Hassan was a religious bigot because in this old clip he says that people who aren't practicing Islam, are like animals. But of course that's a horrible thing to say. But by Sam Harris's standards, that shouldn't count as bigotry because Hassan, the old version of Hassan was attributing everything that was wrong with the non-Muslim population to the fact that they weren't believing and practicing Islam. So either saying, "Oh, I was criticizing their ideas," is a get out of jail free pass for accusations of bigotry, or it's not. If it is, then Mehdi Hassan wasn't a religious bigot 15 years ago, and if it's not, then Sam Harris can't use that defense either. Last point about this is that when he says, "Oh, if Mehdi Hassan has truly gotten over his religious bigotry, that he can't criticize me for being an Islamophobe," right? Because the idea is that Sam Harris is just criticizing Islamic fundamentalism, so anybody who really wasn't an Islamic fundamentalist anymore would be fine with that and wouldn't accuse Harris of Islamophobia. And that's a false dilemma wrapped in a straw man. So
is that that sounds like a biography of Sam Harris. All right, sorry.
Yeah, no,
wrapped
that
in a trust
actually
fund.
would be.
Sorry.
Ad
homs.
Wrapped in a straw man, the Sam Harris story. But yeah, absolutely, because it's a straw man because of course nobody is actually saying that, "Oh, Harris is a horrible person and a bigot," because he's criticizing Islamic fundamentalism. Right? Lots of people criticize Islamic fundamentalism and don't get accused of being bigots or anything like that. Everybody in the discussion is against Islamic fundamentalism. In fact, for that matter, lots of people criticize religion in general or Islam, and but of course you can make a distinction between that and what Harris does when he says that Muslim immigrant populations are backwards and they're a threat to Europe and we should profile them and torture them and possibly nuke them, although I'm just doing a thought experiment.
Right.
So the idea, so this is both a severe misrepresentation, a straw man of what people are actually criticizing when they criticize Harris, and a ridiculous false dilemma because there are more options than being cool with Islamic fundamentalism and thinking, and being cool with what Harris is saying, right? It's not that your two choices are either to have no problem with even the most extreme versions of Islamic thought or to agree with Sam Harris about everything. And I think maybe part of him knows that because one thing that really struck me, I don't know if this was your impression when you were looking over this whole exchange, but is that Harris almost seemed like he was kind of tired of his own bullshit at this point. Harris, instead of writing a new, 6,000 word screed like he usually would in these situations, he just linked Hassan to something that he wrote years ago. And Hassan actually repeatedly pointed out in the Twitter exchange, hey, but wait a second, you aren't just criticizing, Islamic ideas. You're saying that Muslim immigrants are backwards and all this stuff. And Harris didn't really engage with that. It's almost like he's kind of like, at this point he's been saying this stuff for so long that's like, okay, I need to go through the motions for the fans. But my heart's not really in it.
I also noticed when he said that Mehdi was a CNN contributor, which was interesting because it's false. But like, I guess, he's on CNN a lot. It's not the biggest error in the world. But somebody pointed out that the place that called him a CNN contributor apparently was Breitbart. So it's also like intimating that literally maybe Sam Harris is like reading Breitbart, which is just actually like an incredible embarrassment in and of itself. But like, yeah, no, I did kind of get that impression, but it also struck me that part of what's happening is a broader shift of narrative and some combination of the fact that, I don't exactly know when things started to change. I mean, I think certainly people like, for years, Omar Aziz, Glenn Greenwald, plenty of people, frankly, me, starting on YouTube a couple years ago, were quite willing to robustly critique the, obvious, massive flaws, historical errors, and incredibly disturbing sort of intimations of Harris's, just simplistic work. But I think partially what's happening is there's, and I don't know if you'll like this because but not the version you're talking about. You're saving and depolluting the rhetoric of logic to actually get us to a point where we can actually use these methodologies to have a coherent conversation. But it felt like, yeah, I don't know, that there's been enough sort of pushback against just the sort of fundamental doltishness of like what someone like Sam Harris is doing that, that maybe there's a slight upgrade in people's ability to like read and think a little contextually. And there in turn, yeah, that Sam Harris is also, yeah. And I also do think he did seem kind of sick of it because I think like, the new stuff is, I mean, the last big thing was his, embrace of racist IQ stuff. That was his last kind of major public melodrama. And also maybe, he obviously still wants this kind of broad recognition, but maybe there's something that's nice. Like, it's hard to debate Murtaza Hussain and Mehdi Hassan and Juan Cole. It's very easy to sit and, talk to Dave Rubin. I mean, my God.
That's right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So Dave Rubin is certainly not going to challenge him on his abysmal ignorance of history, which is one of the big threads. You're talking about previewing the themes of your book,
right?
Which I've been lucky enough to read some of what you've written, and that's a big theme there, because that's really one of the things that connects a lot of the things that Harris is wrong about, and not just wrong, but like sort of gallingly, like this weird way, given that he wants to be Mr. Science, like he's almost like proudly ignorant about a lot of factual information that pertains to these things, like like in the race IQ debate, right? One of his most memorable statements was, "The history doesn't matter."
Literally says this to Ezra Klein in a whiny, aggrieved manner. The history is irrelevant, and that's that is, I mean, that's quite a take in general for basically discussing almost like any topic outside of like really, really narrow math questions. And and when you're talking specifically about the history of race in the United States and the construction of intelligence and human classification systems, to say that the history is irrelevant, I mean, that is that's a take there. But I think, yeah, and it does intersect, because part of my, as you know, my argument is not just that. I mean, of course, they're all ahistorical, but the subtext, and in that quote, I mean, Harris's work is essentially aggressively anti-historical. And in fact, obviously I think a proper, thorough historic reading does lead to some version of left politics, whatever, there's huge flexibility and range in that. But I think, frankly, like, you could even say just more broadly, I mean, you could still even have more right-wing conclusions, but you could just not, it would be impossible to have this sort of like complete, just utter limit of range of talking about profoundly important and really complicated areas and basically think that like some combination of like stats and, you know, your own sort of self-directed thought experiments can get you there is actually methodologically reckless and a war on most ways of human knowing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, and it's not, I mean, look, you know, you might be able to come to like broadly right-wing conclusions about this if you're willing to, you know, bite enough bullets in terms of the underlying morality of what you were saying.
Right.
But you certainly couldn't come to the, to just these like aggressively reductive, simplistic conclusions that he's come into, right? Like that,
It'd be impossible.
That Harris, yeah, exactly. You know, that like Harris wants to say, oh, you know, the explanation for, you know, why Al-Qaeda exists is that, you know, look at these violent passages in the Quran, you know, which is which really raises some pretty obvious questions about the millennia and a half or so, you know, that Islam existed, but Al-Qaeda did not. And when he says, you know, oh, you know, the history is irrelevant about race and IQ, you know, like he's saying that, you know, all we should look at is this snapshot, right? You know, that like, oh, here's how everybody's doing on IQ tests right now, and anything that would cause, you know, like educational disparities, et cetera, right? You know, like I always thought that the best line on this came from Nathan Robinson in his takedown of Harris, his takedown of Charles Murray, who Harris was defending there. You know, that Murray says that Murray's big evidence that you can't blame the historical oppression of African Americans for white-black IQ differentials in the contemporary United States is that in the incredibly limited superficial data there is from what IQ testing has happened in Africa, that, you know, the African IQ tests are also bad, right? And Robinson has this beautiful line in there about how, you know, like, okay, some of this testing, you know, comes from, you know, the Congo, you know, we want to talk about the history of Belgian imperialism in the Congo and how that could lead to, how that might also be relevant, and, you know, says that it might have been a little bit difficult for people to hold their pencils for their IQ tests after King Leopold cut off their hands.
Yep. No, that's exactly it. Exactly. And then even the more sort of provocative, take, which I treated this when we covered it, you know, extensively, and had people like Eric Turkheimer on this show as let's take the science on its own terms and debunk it. But I mean, I think IQ is a nonsense concept, and that might bother some people. And it's funny, and I guess I should make clear at this point that all the vaccination jokes are jokes. IQ, no, I'm not joking. I think that this is a pernicious test. I think there's very sound critiques of it, and I think frankly, business and bureaucratically, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. I actually, you know, Nassim Taleb is a genuinely heterodox thinker who is very fun, but also kind of at times super buffoonish and has some really bad takes and some really good takes, but, you know, whatever. But I think his writing on IQ is great, and I agree. So,
you know, and this does tie into a bigger problem with Harris that we talked about a few weeks ago when I was on the show, which is that it's one thing to say, okay, you can scientifically test something, but first you have to figure out what it is that you're testing. Right. And, you know, this ties into the facts value problem for Harris, that he thinks science by itself can tell us, you know, which moral or political goals we should care about, which is just incoherent. Right. And it also ties into the IQ thing, because if you don't have a coherent, well thought out operational view of what it is exactly that this test is supposed to test, then all the data from IQ tests in the world don't add up to anything.
Right. Exactly. Ben Burgess, you will be back on next week. for another edition of the Debunk, and also back in studio soon. Of course, guys, you got to read this book. Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. As soon as it's available on pre-order, I'll be tweeting it out. And Ben, thanks a million as always.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, brother.
Bye.
All right, guys. I'm sorry. No more calls, no more Discord questions. My apologies. And we're also leaving a lot of stories on the table. I might get to them in some live streams over this week. I apologize, but we had, just a lot of riches tonight. But we have a new segment we are going to inaugurate, and we're going to turn it into also the Gulag. So it's going to be a dual segment. And this new segment we are calling, you ever read something in the news or see something online and you think, wow, things are really conforming to my biases there. Like, we'll be doing a show next week. We'll include this next week, but Matt told me that apparently at GoFundMe, there is an effort to unionize. And one of the things that they're saying in terms of not having a union is that the management is saying that they're being disrespectful to the identity of unions, because unions are for people in less privileged sectors of the economy. So I heard that from Matt, and I thought, wow, that's exactly what I think about everything.
I think it's Kickstarter, too.
Kickstarter, excuse me. So Kickstarter executives are using pseudo-woke trash arguments to try to destroy labor unions. That conforms with my biases. And this also conforms with my biases. This is a video that the New York Times did of literally like a YouTube open micer. And let me get personal about this for a second. I'm not above this. I'm not saying that the New York Times should have me do a video on foreign policy hotspots, but I am saying that if apparently an entire production team of the New York Times is available to a profoundly unfunny, like, open micer to opine on a place where the United States wants regime change, I think you could have a solid analyst from new media come on and explain to people before they choke through a David Brooks column that Lula is a political prisoner. I mean, come on. So this video, which will also turn into the Gulag as well, is maybe one of the most embarrassing things we've ever seen. And then we will explain how it conforms to our biases. But this is, what's her name again? It is
Joanna Hausman.
Joanna Hausman.
There is total chaos in Venezuela. Hunger, lack of medicine, and latest, nearly the whole country had a blackout. But most of the conversation in the States focuses on what Trump is doing about Venezuela, and rumors are spreading that the U.S. is considering military intervention.
All options are open.
This movement of the American left against any U.S. involvement in Venezuela is gaining traction. We've got Noam Chomsky, Roger Waters, Oliver Stone, Boots Riley, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Jill Stein, and Bernie.
Why have you stopped short of calling Maduro of Venezuela a dictator?
Well, and of course, we've got this lovely guy.
Donald Trump, hands up Venezuela.
It is not a good look when your slogan is co-opted by a tyrannical dictator. Now,
oh, God. All right. So it turns out that this Hausman person, in addition to be very... you were asking yourself, why is some unfunny person with apparently literally the crudest form of identity politics was like, I am personally interested in a coup there because I don't like the government. Like, her only status here is that she is of the identity of the country. Well, it turns out that her father has been named as Juan Guaido's representative to an organization called the IDB.
My father.
That's right. And Ricardo Hausman, who is a Harvard University professor, was an advisor to the government that actually ran Venezuela before Hugo Chavez was elected to power in 1998. So the New York Times put a video out by a subpar internet performer with no specialty knowledge of this issue, and then didn't disclose the fact that her father was literally personally appointed to the IDB by Juan Guaido, the self-declared president that Donald Trump's administration is trying to put in power in Venezuela. They didn't disclose that. Now, Anya Parampil pointed out, as anybody should, this is obvious. The New York Times failed to disclose that Joanna Hausman is the daughter of Guaido advisor Ricardo Hausman, who was instrumental in neoliberalizing and destroying Venezuela's economy in the 90s and wants to do it again. Hashtag weak journalism, right? Now, guys, what do you think Ricardo Hausman did in response to this? Do you think he said, gee, you know, I stand by my daughter's great work, but probably it should have been disclosed?
Do you think maybe he just kept his mouth shut and tried to pretend it didn't happen?
Yeah, maybe he just said, actually, I have a meeting about how Elliot Abrams can funnel mercenaries into the country to try to start assassinating Bolivarian leaders. I'm a little busy. Or maybe I have a meeting with somebody from the International Monetary Fund about how to privatize things when the regime change finally happens.
Or how to make branches go over power lines faster.
How to make branches. No. Ricardo Hausman echoed the best of our modern political culture, which is he went right to the most dumb, pseudo-woke, the same, like this should be he should be an Amy Klobuchar advisor. This tweet truly deserves at least an honorary mention among the year's most sexist comments. Since Joanna Hausman is my daughter, she's not entitled to her own opinion. She must be speaking on behalf of some male figure that tells her what to say. Seriously. Guys, are you persuaded, or does this confirm your bias about the incredible misuse of these kind of trendy Twitter talking points?
Yeah, I mean, as a Bernie bro, I'm forced to point out that if it was a son YouTube comedian of Ricardo Hausman, I would just let him go.
Right.
Good job,
that is
buddy.
true. I guess we got to be honest. Obviously, if this is Jonah Hausman, we wouldn't have. I mean, we would have critiqued the video, but we would never have brought up the father.
Yeah. Because
and the reckless.
He's his own man.
Yeah, he's his own man. So the New York Times, when these like reckless disregard of journalistic ethics, you know, would be different if it was a guy, because the guy's argument stands on his own, of course.
I mean, I'm sure Ben Burgess could identify the fallacy there, but the idea, and maybe it's an equivocation thing, the idea that everyone's complaining about her having her opinions. No, it's that her opinions are being laundered as if she's some like new and upcoming YouTube star when her dad works for Guaido.
Right.
Like, it's a very simple calculation.
It's really not that complicated.
He must know that, right? Like,
I'm going to assume that he is not a total idiot.
Yeah.
And it knows that he's being breathtakingly, comically cynical. And the question is how many idiots will actually fall for this.
Quite a few, unfortunately.
Sorry?
Got some traction. Quite a few, unfortunately. He got a little traction on that tweet.
Look, these arguments can be bastardized for anything.
People react to that. Like, there's a certain group of people who they see them and they're like, oh, I have to like this because of like the grammar of it.
Right. The grammar without any of the content or any of the meaning. And this is actually like, this is also someone in my book, but it's so funny because the IDW rails against this type of thing. And sometimes, by the way, we give them great case studies because some of what is called left, politics is absolutely ludicrous and leads to things like this. But they are actually the pioneers in the type of literalistic bullshit that leads to this type of tweet. People's complete inability to think critically and contextually and just have like a catechism that they could run through. And honestly, like the structure of how absurd this tweet is not terribly different than a Dave Rubin, thing about free speech or whatever. It's all just verbiage.
I'm looking,
cynically deployed verbiage.
I went to the Johanna Hausman YouTube page.
Ooh.
She has 250,000 subs. And it's all stuff like 10 accidental Spanish curse words.
Oh shit! So it's almost like she's not super. I thought there would be ones on like how Bolivarian socialism increased crime in Caracas. No. Not even like a measured defense of Bolsonaro and trust fund babies? That might be a good topic for her.
Where are you from?
Venezuela.
Oh, Minnesota. You know, I love Minnesota. I have an aunt or
This has happened to you.
My
It's one of the first
threshold is
signs
super
that you are
off.
Venezuelan.
I can't take it. Matt, I can't take it. I can't take it.
Curses tend to be very creative and take up a greater percentage of your sentence than most people.
¡Virga, qué bolas!
Coño de la madre, qué ladilla.
All right, guys, please. These are our patrons. Why do we punish them like this? Oh my God.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And also, let's not forget too that in that video she explicitly starts calling for U.S. Invasion or military action in Venezuela.
Right.
So it's like this is somebody who's making shitty jokes online and then making shitty political commentary with quite serious consequences.
Do you think she was like, Dad, don't tell me about anything that's happening with Guaido because I have my own opinion about the United States having a regime change and installing you in power? By the way, these are the types of people. If you want to have the resources to bum around New York City and make highly produced, relentlessly unfunny videos, it's pretty helpful if your dad was part of an oligarch government in an oil-rich country.
Maybe her dad and Lin-Manuel Miranda's dad could get their kids together for a play date, and they could put together some great content for all of us.
Oh. If you go and visit Puerto Rico, you will absolutely boycott Hamilton at least. And this will bring us to, which you should anyways, this will bring us to tonight's gulag, which is the failing New York Times. Failing New York Times. Seriously, as Matt always says, you obviously are a patron of this show if you're watching, but like, be a patron of this show. Be a patron of other independent media. Support local newspapers. Directly support journalists. They both profoundly do not need your money. And while I do not want the New York Times to cease to exist, they are editorially an incredible problem. And honestly, I don't give a fuck. I don't. You know what? Honestly, if they, there's plenty of journalists there that I would want to see land on their feet, but institutionally failing.
Can I add a crime to the New York Times? I mean, there's plenty, but there's one that happened recently that really pissed me off. The Texas Observer, which is a really great, smaller paper that's covering local issues in Texas. The New York Times literally lifted a whole story that the Texas Observer had broken like a week before, and they didn't highlight or acknowledge where they got their original source for the story or the idea, and it's just so fucked up.
Of course,
because these tiny media places, they need eyes on them. They need to get acknowledged for the work that they do, and it's just like these big organizations that just ignore them. It's just so ridiculous, and that's why we have so many issues with small papers going under all the time.
Can we get a little gulag music here? Oh, it's fine. What do you got?
I'm just looking for a...
United forever in friendship and labor. I don't know the rest of it.
South it up. All right, folks. Actually, all right, let's do one more. I think we might be a touch light on the clippings, maybe. I want to clip one more. Let's do one more video. This is really important, and we'll just take 2 minutes, and then we'll close up, and we'll get to everybody's calls and questions next week. Alina asks about Guyana. I really want to cover what's going on in Guyana, and I honestly have been tapping my networks to the extent I have possible. I've been looking for sources. We were trying to prepare a packet on what was happening in Guyana last week, and literally the only story, unfortunately, English-speaking story that I could find was released on a Chamber of Commerce website. So we will keep trying. It's very important, but I just don't have the foundations to go off of it yet. This is an extremely important story. The Trump administration's pulling out of the Iran deal is by far the most reckless thing and dangerous thing from an international standpoint they have done. With the Russia stuff, I'm not going to talk terribly more about it. I'm already pretty sick of it. I think fundamentally Taibbi's critique from a media and body politics standpoint, along with people like Masha Gessens, that's my view. And honestly, in order for it to not be my view, you would need to have had Donald Trump be parachuted out of the White House and taken to Alcatraz. Honestly, anything short of that, I think that the story was a significant media overhype and failure. And I have real problems between how those narratives are formed between intelligence services and the media, and how some Democrats used it. Now, on the other hand, I think it's symptomatic, not causal. The relationship between military analysts being on cable networks and networks in general is an age-old problem. It was not started by this. And no, I don't think it's going to lead to World War III. So at the end of the day, my position remains chronically annoying to apparently everybody. But I will say that I would like to see a fraction of the intention, both from people on both sides of the equation, worrying about that hypothetical, to the actual catastrophic consequences of pulling out of the Iran deal, of re-sanctioning Iran, which is hitting the population and everything from medications to flight safety to an already extremely stagnant economy that only helps the very vicious hardliners, which do in fact seriously violate people's rights in Iran. Coupled with this, the Trump administration has moved forward in a very aggressive way towards selling nuclear technology to MBS's Saudi Arabia. This, if you have a nuclearized, in addition to Israel, Saudi Arabia, the plates of the problem in this core structure of U.S. policy are locked into place on a whole other level. And it will also, in addition to the reckless, insane decision of pulling out of the Iran deal that was working, is a whole other incentive structure for proliferation. This is a report from friend of show, Mike Hanna for Al Jazeera. We're going to watch a bit of it and then we'll wrap up.
The 24-page report is extensive in reach and detail, providing names, dates, and specific communications relating to U.S. nuclear technology and Saudi Arabia. The Oversight Committee, under Representative Elijah Cummings, based the report on what it calls whistleblower accounts, evidence provided by career officials within the administration deeply concerned about what would appear to be a deeply corrupt process circumventing Congress.
What is surprising is the scope of U.S. government officials directly involved in these business-to-business talks without disclosing potential economic interest in the work that they were doing. And that is certainly what is new.
Among those named in the report, President Trump's son-in-law and advisor, Jared Kushner, who refinanced a deeply indebted New York building with a company called Brookfield Business Partners, which had just acquired a nuclear services company, Westinghouse Electric. Under scrutiny as well, Kushner's ongoing relationship with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And central to the report, longtime Trump supporter and one-time national security advisor Michael Flynn, who the report says was deeply involved in pushing a nuclear plan for Saudi Arabia that included the construction of as many as 40 Saudi nuclear plants.
We will continue on this story. This is incredibly important. And for people who also watch the Majority Report, I'm going to be talking with Mike Hanna about this on Thursday. All right, everybody, I want to thank all of you. Thank you to new patrons. Of course, make sure that your cards are up to date and everything is good to go. For the payment info, you know, that frustrating fall off, but we're starting to bounce back, so just double check everything. Get your tickets to the LA live show this Sunday. We're talking, can the left be strategic, with C. Derek Varn. He's one of the most interesting people out there. You can also hear him at Zero Books with Doug Lane. Sunday the 14th, there's going to be a special episode because we're going away to LA with Adom Ketchiachu on Third Worldism. On the 9th, Soumya Shankar on the elections in India, and then Felix Biederman returns. He's here in studio. And on April 16th, the return of the great Richard Wolff. Watch out, Griscom. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.